The Reset podcast is sponsored by Bose. With my new Bose QC35 headphones, nothing gets between me and my music. The noise canceling is world class, they're completely Bluetooth, so there's no wires. The sound is amazing. My producer and I love these so much that we use them to record every single show. For more information about Bose QC35 headphones and other Bose products, check out Bose.com. Hey everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of the Reset podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignott, co-founder of the brand experience agency DFlash, and we're coming to you from New York City. Each week, I bring in an influential friend from marketing, business, or even government, and we delve into what's really happening in the industry and try and make sense of it all. Of course, we can't talk about business without talking about how it impacts this very moment in time. We'll laugh, we'll debate, and we'll give frank insight into what's going on in the world and try and navigate our way through, all while enjoying some wine and french fries on my couch. This week, I have someone rather hysterical. I've got my own personal lawyer, Matthew Moisan from Moisan P.C., and we'll be talking about what's happening in the world of legal business when regards to startups. So, hi, Matthew. Welcome.
Hello. How are you doing, Laura?
Oh, just peachy. Thanks, Matthew. So whenever we start the podcast, we always try to make this really simple and have an icebreaker question. And so the icebreaker question is usually really simple, but it takes us in a wide, kind of fun way of figuring stuff out about how you got to be who you are. So without further ado, first question is, what was your first job?
My first real job was shoveling snow when I was 8. There's a great story around that. So I was living in Syosset, which is a smallish town, and we'd go knock on doors and hey, you want us to shovel your driveway? And some people say yes, some people say no, and we'd just keep walking until people said yes. So I'm literally 8, and
Isn't that a little bit young?
Well, my mother was progressive,
gotcha.
And Jewish, which I know it doesn't go together, but that's
But
okay.
she wanted you out of the house more than anything else.
Yes. I don't think she had a choice. It wasn't shovel snow or sit at home. It was shovel snow or do something else that was going to get me in trouble.
Because you were that child.
Yeah, of course.
Gotcha.
So I'm walking around shoveling snow, and this nice old woman was like, you want to come in and have hot chocolate? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want hot chocolate. So I get home, I tell my mom, I'm like, yeah, I met this nice old woman. She was on the box. She said, do you want chocolate? Hot chocolate? I said, yes. And that was the last time I shoveled snow. Because my mom was like, you could have been killed. She could have spiked the chocolate. And so my shoveling snow career was short lived.
Oh my! Because I feel like this sounds like a nursery rhyme gone horribly wrong. Like Mother is Grim, where you go in the house and you never come out again.
It was. But then so I moved to California. I'm in high school, and I had some tutoring jobs and some other random things here and there. And one of the people around the neighborhood had a service business where they went into buildings and serviced the plants. So if you have picture a high rise in Manhattan and there's flowers and plants and pottery all over the place, they would go water the plants and make sure the plants look nice and replace the plants and take care of the plants.
You were a botanist.
I wouldn't go that far,
okay.
But I took care of plants.
Were any of these plants illegal?
No. I was. It was a long time ago in California. That was. It wasn't marijuana was not in its current state.
That's unfortunate. Okay, so you were survived nearly being killed by an old lady in Long Island, and then you were a botanist of some degree, where you basically were a paid plant waterer.
Correct.
And so now, what is it you do? I mean, I said in the beginning that you're my lawyer, and I better not be getting billed for this. Tell us about what is it you do and how you're different and how you got to be this dude who has his own law firm at such a young age.
Yeah, sure. So what I do. So Moisan Legal P.C. represents entrepreneurs in a variety of capacities. It's everything from business formation, business financing, all the way through sale, which is, M&A, whether you're buying out a partner, buying another business, or selling your business. How did I get here? Well, I worked at a big firm for a number of years, and I was absolutely miserable. And
how many hours a week did you actually work?
A lot. I mean, I typically get to the office by 8 and leave at 8 or 9, 6 days a week. So however many hours that is, a lot. I mean, you work a lot.
Time.
You work a lot. I mean, it's not. It's when you're an associate at a law firm, your life is the law firm. I mean, it's you have no control. The partners are for the most part pricks, and you literally do what they say. So if it's 8 p.m. and they're like, hey, you have to do this now, you do it. That's like the ethos of a law firm. It's the associates are slaves, and you're a slave for 8 to 10 years, and then the hope is you go partner and you make some money. I did that. I hated it. I looked up at the partners at the firm, and I was like, I don't know that I want that job. So ultimately, I wound up changing firms and getting fired. And I contemplated going back to business school. I contemplated moving back to California. I met my wife around the same time. It was an interesting period of life. And
aren't those always the best?
Yeah. And
you ain't got no job?
Yeah, I know. I don't know what she was thinking. I literally, we were on a date, and I was like, listen, we need to talk. We went to Soul Cycle. It was like, we went on a date to Soul Cycle.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Cheesy. You were that couple.
Yeah, what can I say? So, so I was like, we need to talk. And she thought, it's funny, she thought I was going to break up with her. She had this like nervous energy around like, oh no, this is it. And meanwhile, I'm thinking like, oh God, she's not going to want to date me. I'm unemployed. So, anyways, that worked out. Obviously we're married, but, my dad, I was on the phone with my dad. I was like, listen, I'm going to do all these different things. And he said, start a firm. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Start a what? And he said, try, you got nothing to lose. And at that point, I didn't have anything to lose. So I tried, and in spite of myself, have been successful at it. What we do differently is, number one, we care.
I would actually agree with this. Matthew and his partner Aaron, they do care. I recently had to hire them for something, which we won't discuss, but they do care. I think a lot of lawyers forget that you're dealing with emotionally sensitive circumstances, and it's not easy. It's your clients are going through something that they're requiring your help, and most of the time they're requiring your help when they're at a point of vulnerability. How can you add value and guide them through that process? It's not about necessarily negotiating the best deal. It's about getting the deal done, having your client understand the deal points, and having them make intelligent decisions. Is it better to get a higher payout or a shorter non-compete? Is it better to get more money in the financing or get better terms? And those are decisions that I can't make for the client. The client has to make, but they have to have the information to make those decisions. So I view law as a means through which to solve problems. And I think, for me, that's what makes us different. It's interesting because I think a lot of times folks, when they think about lawyers and like they don't want to talk to you unless they absolutely need to get to you. And when they do get to you, it's usually, oh shit, something terrible has happened. But what about when you're first starting out? Like, I think a mistake that, even with starting our own business, we made early on was we didn't sit down and talk to our lawyer earlier on. And some of the mistakes that we made that every small business owner makes probably would have probably been mitigated had we just said, dude, let's talk to a lawyer. So like, what do you think are some of the ways that like when you now got this idea, I want to start this business, I needed to talk to a lawyer. When and how do we sort of like engage someone, and how do they sort of like? Cause I think a lot of people freak out that they have to pay all this money up front when they're starting. So how do you guys mitigate against that, and how do you sort of guide people from the very beginning?
Yeah, it's always a sensitive and hard thing, right? Because I charge for my time. At the end of the day, you pay me for time. And it's always hard when you're starting a company because you're worried that, well, I don't want to spend X on a lawyer. I want to spend X on marketing or X on my product or X on design. You want to spend money on things that are going to produce more money. Whereas at the end of the day, the lawyer's services for the most part are trying to prevent a disaster. What happens when things go wrong? I think you should talk to a lawyer as soon as possible. And I think
Ooh, I have an idea. Hire a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, it's not necessarily hire a lawyer, but I have an idea. There are plenty of lawyers out there and plenty of services out there that you can find someone that's inexpensive, that you can at least get some clarity around. Do I need to hire a lawyer? Because most of the time when you have the idea and you have a partnership and all these people are doing these other things, you just assume, no, I'll worry about it later.
Yep.
I can guarantee you it's going to cost you more money later. You know this. You've been through this.
And it will cost you so much more money later.
If you
Lord have mercy, let me tell you.
if you can get in early and plan, we're not cheap, but we are willing to work with clients. And you need to find a lawyer has that attitude. Like, listen, I want to grow with you. I will invest my time today to grow with you so that, you know what, 5-10 years from now, when I send you a bill at full rack, you're going to go, I'm going to pay you more.
Here's my black Amex. Just charge it.
Right.
Just charge
it. There's a lot of firms. I think a mistake people make around this is they go to the largest firm in the room. And when you go to those, multinational, national firms, you're going to pay a significant bill
and they're not going to care because they're humongous. They don't have time for you.
They're not in the business of small business. They're in the business of big business. So, and don't get me wrong, I've worked for them and I have great relationships with many of them, but there's a time and a place. So I think it's important when you're starting to find someone who's going to take care of you in the way in which you need to take care of. There's certain things you need to do. Do you need a trademark on day one? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the situation. Do you need to put together some sort of agreement between you and your partners? Yes. Does it need to be $10,000? Probably not. Can it be? Yes. What are the issues you have, and what's the best way to resolve them? So I wouldn't look at law as a one-stop shop. I think you need to address certain issues, but first you need to figure out what issues you need to address. So don't go to a lawyer and say, we're starting a business. What do I do?
You're not
because I can't answer that.
Right.
Go to a lawyer and say, hey, my partner and I are doing X, Y, and Z. We've known each other for this period of time. Here's what I'm concerned about. What would you be concerned about in this situation? What do we need?
When folks are thinking about getting legal services, they want to jump over and try and be as cheap as possible, and they see commercials on TV like for LegalZoom. What does that even mean?
Yeah, listen, LegalZoom is a great provider of documents, right? So you want to start a company, you don't want to pay a lawyer, you can go on LegalZoom and get the documents you need. There's a ton of value to that. It's inexpensive. The downside is quite frankly, you don't know how to interpret the documents. And I'm not saying that the document isn't good. I'm not saying that the document doesn't have what you need. What I am saying is that all is that, so there's other like Docracy, you can download various documents on Docracy. You probably download stock purchase agreements and formation agreements and various financing agreements. There are forms of almost anything you need online. That's great. But unless you've done it before,
you don't know what you're reading.
You don't quite know what you're reading. So listen, I represent people who've gone on LegalZoom and then call me and say, okay, now what? I represent, or they're on LegalZoom and then, 2 years later, it's like, okay, we did this on LegalZoom and now I've got to go back and fix whatever they did because they didn't take the time to do it right. So listen, LegalZoom is a great business and quite frankly, it's forced lawyers to bring the price point of certain services down. So, you call me and say, hey, I want to form an LLC. I know my fees to form an LLC in New York are approximately $1,500. There's a $1,200 publication requirement, and it's about $300 of New York State filing fees. Previously, I could charge you $2,500 to do that because, quite frankly, there was no other place to do it. Now you can go on LegalZoom and get it done for $1,500. So it's forced me to adjust the way I bill and what I can and can't charge for. But and again, if you're looking to get something done on the cheap and it's just be short and quick about it, it's a great service. The downside is it's not going to address the things that a counsel will. So like, for instance, it's not going to talk about what happens if there's a disagreement. It's not going to help you guys define equity and who owns what. It's not going to talk about what happens if the company needs more capital. It's not going to talk about the way the capital is allocated between you and your partner. Are those things you need?
Yes.
Well, quite frankly, I don't know. But just to assume that you don't need them is a problem. So I think it's a great service. I think if you look at it as the answer, I think that's a little naive, because I think that you don't know what you don't know. And that's one of those situations where you're relying on this service to fill the void, but it's not filling the void. It's only giving you peace of mind. It's not answering the questions that you don't know how to answer, because you don't know how to ask those questions.
Yeah, and the time that you spent to go and download this stuff and look at us, like, oh, I think this is okay. You could have been like, let me find a lawyer and say, like, this is my budget. Can you help me with this?
Absolutely.
And you'd probably be far better off than doing that. No, yeah. I totally get it. It's funny because, like, I think about all these tech companies that I've run into over the years, and they're like, oh, well, sign my NDA. And I'm like, well, I don't care about your NDA. And it's probably because it came off of LegalZoom. Speaking of which, I think my listeners are super smart, but in case they don't know what this is, can you explain what an NDA actually does?
Sure. So an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. It's also sometimes referred to as a restrictive covenant agreement. They're somewhat used in the same context. An NDA basically says, I'm going to give you confidential information. You cannot disclose it. And then it's going to define what the term confidential information is. Something to kind of think about there is, sometimes confidential information is defined as something that is stamped confidential. Depending upon what you're giving back and forth, you need to be cognizant of that. You're probably not going to stamp your stuff confidential. I mean, that's just not the way things work. So you need to be conscious of what that definition is. And then it's going to go on to say, okay, you must maintain the information that we disclose at the same level that you would maintain your own confidential information. There's typically exceptions to the definition of confidential information around what's public information you disclose, build or understand yourself, and information that may be required by a government or other proceeding. So the document in essence says, we're going to exchange docs. Don't give those docs to anyone else. Don't share this information with anyone else.
It's like, see it and shut your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be mutual, meaning that, both you and I can agree to it, that I'll give you information, you'll give me information, and we'll both maintain the confidentiality. Or it could be a singular, where it only protects me, or exclusive, where it only protects me. So they're not complicated documents. You should not be paying a ton of money for someone to draft one for you. Sometimes they have other provisions like non-competes, which would be, you can't compete with my business. Those are usually problematic. It's always a pain point.
Right.
And they also sometimes have non-circumvention, which is, I'm sharing all this information with you. So, like, let's say we're entering into a business deal, and I'm going to hire a lawyer to, find me a space to throw an awesome event. And she introduces me to someone who has a space. And so the non-circumvent would be, I can't go to that person that she introduced me to.
You can't go around.
Correct. 100%. Some venture capitalists and angels will just get totally turned off if you say sign this NDA. You have to remember that, your idea, while it is brilliant, there's probably other people with a similar idea.
And do you think I think, with a lot of small business clients, because, we run into lots of startups, and oftentimes, you hear about them being all freaked out about every single thing about their business, and like, oh, I can't even talk to you unless I have an NDA. My NDA is fully signed. And I think, they oftentimes get so legalized advice that they don't get that, like, there are core things that you really need to do. So what are the things that, if you're a small business owner, that you sort of need to watch out for from the very beginning, so that you're not gonna run yourself into a wall too early on?
Yeah, that's a really hard question, because it's very much contingent on what business you're in. I can talk about NDAs for a moment. NDAs are valuable, but they're not. They're a piece of paper that says you're going to not disclose something. If you disclose, I'm shrugging my shoulders. I mean, if you disclose it, you disclose it. If you breach the NDA, sure. Are you locking that information in a lockbox that's not accessible? No. So I think that a lot of lawyers sell fear. I can sell you on, you have to do this because the world's going to end if you don't. And it's very easy for me to do that because I'm in a position of I know more about this than you do.
Right. I think that's what people get freaked out about because they don't know. I think the not knowing is the hardest part.
Right. So for me, the answer is you need to find a lawyer who understands the law, but is going to talk to you in a way that isn't you have to do this or else. Because I can convince you to spend money on when I instill fear in you. That's not necessarily the way that I want to run my practice, and that's also not the way that you're going to get the best advice, because now you're acting in a way of, oh my God, I'm so scared of this result, as opposed to this is what I need, this is what I want, this is the risk I'm willing to take. So, in terms of, what are small businesses doing wrong, how to mitigate those risks, I think you need to look at your business and think about how can things go wrong? Where can things go wrong? Is it, it could be a partner, it could be an employee. I mean, you should have employment agreements in place. You should protect your intellectual property. In the startup ecosystem that we're in, information flows freely. That's not always good. If you have a secret recipe to the next Burt's Beans or whatever those beans are, those beans.
Lord have mercy, really?
Those commercials with the dog with the beans is Burt. Anyways,
I know.
So
I know.
if that's your secret recipe, you have to decide how to protect it.
And is it trade secret? Is it a trade
secret? Is it a patent? Is it copyright? Is it, I don't know. There's no necessarily right answer, but I think that not doing anything is not right. I think that spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on a lawyer to protect something that may not be protectable or may not help your business also isn't right. It's finding that middle ground of this is what's important. What actions do I need to take to protect it?
What's interesting? I mean, I want to say, like, early on when we started the company, we had this one tech company that we met with. And when we first met them and we saw the platform, we were like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. It's got lots of bells and whistles. And we wanted to work with them to kind of help do some of their marketing. And so we kind of sent them our standard agreements. And then I never forget this. And basically the guy's wife was an attorney. And I think this is also kind of things not to do.
That's always a problem.
It's right.
Not necessarily the guy's wife, but when you have the family involved who's like, I got this, that never ends well.
And basically, and I think this is a big tip for startup folks. It's please keep your family out of this, because they no matter how they say that they're trying to be objective, they're not, because they can't be. And this was his wife, and basically she sort of ripped our agreement apart and said, "Oh, well, I'm doing you guys a favor because your lawyer just didn't do a good job about this." This is pre-Matthew, of course, but it was still a good agreement. And we were like, "So you do realize that we're not wasting any more time on this, and if you're going to behave like this with us as your marketing agency, then we're not going to give you our clients or give you introductions to people who we represent, because you're just going to make things difficult, because every single thing you're super scrutinizing because you're worried about every little thing." And I think that's what oftentimes happens with startups, that they get so pent up and worried about how awesome their stuff is, and forgetting about that, there has to be a good give and take.
Yeah. It's very easy for me to spend 10 hours on a 2-page document. It's very easy. because I want to make sure that, I crossed every T and dotted every I, and there's something final about this agreement. If this agreement is challenged, I want it to hold up. If someone looks at this agreement from an outside perspective, I want them to know what I meant. So,
know what I'm saying?
You feel me? So words are important to me. The way that I express the deal is important to me, but that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the deal to over lawyer it. You have to get to a point where it's like, okay, we've read this 100 times. It's correct. Let's sign it and move on. If things go wrong, things are going to go wrong.
Well, I think a lot of times what ends up happening, especially with smaller companies, because you hold everything so dear and every single dollar is so tightly bound to you, that you stop thinking about the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. So that company, we were I remember I hung up on him the day before Thanksgiving because I was like, I am done with this. And I just remember, you can do whatever you want, click. And then by like mid-February of the next year, they were out of business. It's like, because you were showing signs that you guys couldn't get out of your own way for your business and see that, like, you can't look at this from an old school perspective. Or the flip side is that you have like a family friend who's an attorney who's really old school and doesn't see the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it's very interesting because having had varying experiences with different lawyers over the last few years, what I've found is that find a lawyer who's in your industry, because what we found early on was that if you kind of understood that we're in startups, things are fluid, reputations mean everything. And I think a lot of times more old school attorneys sort of see things more black and white. Well, oh, you can close tomorrow and start back up and no one's going to care. And it's like, no, you try that, your reputation's set on fire. And I think it's really important to sort of understand your industry and understand that the people who work for you also understand the industry that you're in.
You have to remember that law, you know, when you say you're a lawyer, there's 15 to 25 different types of specialties underneath that. So you know, we represent entrepreneurs. That means we have one set of skills. If you come to me and you got arrested for a criminal matter, I have no idea how to help you. I have friends. I mean, that for me, that's a phone call to my buddies who specialize in criminal law. So I think it's important to find people that understand the legal like realm that you're in and play in that space and use those people. But it's also important to find someone you like. You know, you have to trust your lawyer. If you don't trust your lawyer for whatever reason it is, he or she could be the best lawyer in the world. If there's not just the ultimate trust, you're not going to get the type of representation you want. So find someone you trust, and that's going to give you the kind of baseline of this person's going to help me and look out for my best interest. As soon as there's a lack of trust, the relationship goes south. What
would you say are some examples of when folks have been really smart along in your experience about like using you and using your team and been super effective?
The more information you share with your lawyer, the better advice we can provide. So the clients that we work really well with share information with us. So if something's going to go wrong with my client, you know, we represent a marketing company that, you know, I'm on the phone with these guys twice a week, even if there's no legal stuff. Because when there's legal stuff, I can say, oh yeah, well that's like this, or what happened with this, and how does this affect that? Because I know where their business is. So I think the best way, you don't want, your lawyer shouldn't be someone that you pick up the phone and call and talk to only when you feel like you need them.
You're not the in case shit people.
It's not like, hey, draft this document. It's like, you know, hey, here's what's going on in my business. Like, hey, here's where I am. I think I'm going to raise money in the next 6 months. What does that mean? You know, where am I? What's going on? You know, I think I'm going to redo my website. Should I be thinking about anything? I think I'm going to launch this new product. So the more, and listen, again, I'm sure that kind of sends mixed signals, because you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to call my lawyer because I'm going to pay him to spend 15 minutes with him and update him on something that's not legal.
Right.
You know, first off, you know, you shouldn't really be getting charged for those calls, right? It's
step one. It's right. I mean, like that's the cost of doing that. That's just kind of the cost of doing business for you in the future. It's like if you email me and say, "Hey, Laura, what's going on?" and I just say, "Hey, dude, come by and we'll have a coffee."
Right. You're not getting charged for the coffee. I think it's important to have your lawyer understand your business, have your lawyer be involved in your business, have your lawyer be more than just a document drafter.
Right.
We're really good at drafting documents, but I can draft a better, more effective document if I know where you are and I know what's going on in your world.
Use your lawyer for other things as well, because you probably know a good accountant. Right. You probably know someone who can do a small business loan. You know,
we're really good at solving problems. So involve us in your problems. That's if you boil down law to like the quintessential piece of it, it's solving problems. So the more that we can help with different things, the more we're going to feel engaged, the more when the problem arises, I'm going to be able to say, okay, I understand what's going on. You don't have to spend 2 hours explaining it to me. I know your business. I know where you are. I know what the pain points are. I know that this provision of the agreement is important to you. You know, for instance, like if we're talking about a non-compete, I'll know your top clients. So I'll know, okay, we have to carve out these top clients because those are the people you work with. If I don't have that knowledge, it's very hard for me to do the deal. So for me, it's building those relationships, having those conversations. I'm willing to invest those 15 minutes because when shit hits the fan, I'm more effective.
What's some kind of like classic mistakes that you just kind of see along the way, and how do you get around that?
It's usually emotion based. So a lot of mistakes when you're doing a deal are because you're so emotionally involved in the deal, you can't separate what's good for you, what's good for the company versus what you want. So I think mistakes are contingent or always tied to emotions. You know, you're so tied up in the business that you think that the sale price should be, you know, $2 million instead of 1.8, when the reality is where you are in life, that $200,000 doesn't really make a big difference. But for whatever reason, that $2 million is stuck in your head. So I think most mistakes are tied to people being so emotional and just not being able to separate. And then once that emotion subsides, or you talk to someone and you're like, it's not that big a deal, you're able to make a more conscious decision. So, and that goes back, it's funny because that kind of goes back to the better you know your lawyer, the more you're going to trust him or her, and the more that person's going to be able to say, like, hey, asshole, it doesn't make a difference. If I don't know you,
hey, asshole.
If I don't know you that well, I can't say that. You know, I can't. If I'm, you know, so, you know, again, we do a lot of deals, and sometimes we do deals with people we like, and sometimes we do deals with people we don't like. If I don't know you well enough to know where you're coming from, it's harder for me to give the best advice for you, because advice can be delivered in hundreds of different ways. You may respond to, hey, asshole, you're wrong.
Totally.
Someone else may respond to, hey, I don't think this is the best opportunity because of blah, 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 blah. Like, so, you know, but, and I have to, you know, I think a good lawyer is able to read his or her client and say, this is the way it can be delivered so that you listen. But if I don't know you, I can't deliver it that way. So, I mean, listen, you see mistakes in every different type, you know, you see people blatantly violating different types of laws that it's like, I didn't know, you know. So a big one you see, and like Uber's involved in this, is like the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. You see people classifying employees as independent contractors all the time. Is that something that can get you in trouble? Absolutely. Is that something that people are going to continue to do? Yes.
Wait, hold on, because I hire a bunch of independent contractors.
Listen, I
have disability insurance for them, though.
That's not the answer. There's a set that doesn't solve you. Damn. There's a set of criteria. There's a set of criteria of when someone's an independent contractor. The traditional example is, you know, you hire a plumber. The plumber comes to your house. They have their own equipment. They come at their own time, and they perform a job that you don't oversee. So I'll speak for myself. I'm Jewish. I don't know how to fix the
You don't know how to
sink.
fix anything, do you?
Right.
At all. Can you turn a light bulb on?
I've been known to change a light bulb.
Okay.
I've been known, and then it blew out, and I had to hire someone to do it. But I did put the first time it was me.
Do you know the difference between a Phillips head screwdriver and a regular screwdriver, a flathead?
Yes. One is like one has more little things than the other.
Oh God. Okay, so you hire the plumber.
Oh, right. So you hire the plumber, and they come and they do a job, and you don't oversee it. You don't control it. You don't provide them the tools that are necessary to do the job, right?
It's all their own stuff.
It's all their own stuff. So now, if you hire someone and when you think of what they're doing, they're the equivalent of that. Mm-hmm. They're an independent contractor.
Gotcha.
And this is not legal advice, just as a disclaimer.
We are not giving any legal advice.
So now, if you hire someone and they come into your office and they use your computer and you direct them and they're there from 9 to 5, you can call them an independent contractor. They're probably not.
What are they?
They're an employee.
Really?
Yes.
Good to know.
Yes. So I mean, listen, again, like we're talking about mistakes. Is that a mistake? Of course. Can it get you in trouble? Sure. You know, the various commissions or departments are going to come after you and say, hey, that's not really an employee. Is it fixable? Or you pay a fine, you fix it? Sure. End of the world? No. But, you know, you see those are types of things where, you know, hey, Matthew, I'm hiring someone. What do I do? You know, do we need to put an employment agreement together? Should we? Yes. Here's what you do.
So when you have serious question. So when you have an employee who's freelancing for you, so is that different than freelancing, whereby like someone's coming to do a project?
So startups love the word freelancing. So freelancing does not answer the question of employee versus independent contractor.
Gotcha.
So you're either the plumber, because that's an easy example, or you're not. If the plumber's a freelancer, great. If the plumber's not a freelancer, great. You're either an employee because you fit that criteria,
gotcha,
or you're an independent contractor. The fact that you describe them as a freelancer doesn't answer the question. So, I have employees. I can call them freelancers. I have independent contractors. I can call them freelancers.
Gotcha. So freelancers really isn't the word to be even.
It's the criteria. It's the criteria of control. It's the criteria of who provides the materials. And again, I'm simplifying this, but that's what you have to look at.
And when you do that, and so if you have a sort of 1099 versus an employee, and you realize that you sort of screwed this up, I'm assuming there's tons of tax implications and everything under creation, and possibly a fine, but it's not the end of the world.
Listen, it's fixable. This is not something that's going to put you out of business unless you do it on a massive scale. It happens here and there. And again, we represent people who make this mistake all the time. It happens all the time. It's kind of prevalent in the community. And listen, like Uber, so there was just a big ruling in England that all of their drivers are actually employees and not independent contractors.
Really?
It's a big deal. Yeah, it's going to cost them a lot of money, and it's going to have to force them to reclassify all of their people. If that were to happen in the U.S. to Uber, it would be
game changer.
It'd be a big issue. And there's other businesses that are built on that model. Does it matter for you and your business? Sure. Is it going to put you out of business? Probably not.
Yeah. So, but it's all about the knowledge being the key. So, like I think it's interesting because like it's like such a big thing in our industry where everyone is always like, well, I've got these 1099, I've got like 12 different people who I just sort of pay. I don't pay any taxes on what they do, and like they just get their 1099 at the end of the year, and that's the end of the world. Forgetting that there are some other legal ramifications when that stuff like that happens, is it an employment issue, or like who's the person who's going to raise the red flag about that?
Typically, the employee will be the one who complains, because this often boils down to overtime.
Got it.
So the employee gets terminated, or the employee is not happy, and they file a claim, and they basically say like, "Hey, listen, you classified me as an independent contractor. I worked 75 hours a week. I'm entitled to overtime of X." And they typically win those complaints.
And there's some good steps here. Would it make sense when you have contractor agreement, independent contractors, that you set an agreement and like this is what you're going to be doing for X amount of dollars, or it doesn't cover?
It's form over substance. So you can put the agreement in place, and when you go to the hearing, you can say, "Hey, here's our agreement that says you're an independent contractor," and the court's going to go, "That's great. Tell me what they did." So it's not you can't contract yourself into a certain thing, right? You can't say, well, you're an employee, but we're going to call you an independent contractor, and we're going to put the contract in place that says this. It's a function of these are the criteria. You either fit the criteria or you don't. The agreement doesn't get you home.
Gotcha. So I think I think especially for our audience here, that like that's a huge thing to pay attention. It happens
all the time.
Because like, look, you're busy and you're trying to figure it out. You bring in a bunch of people who are freelancers, not realizing that like overtime is really important. I know that there's a new freelance and free law that just came through that I think the mayor signed. So like, people have rights in regards to, and it's so important. And I think as a business owner, it's getting that information early so that you can make smarter decisions on how to classify and hire folks.
100%. It goes back to, you need to, when you're out on your own, when you're starting your own business, you need to build a relationship with a lawyer so you can make the call and say, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. Is this kosher?"
And they're like, yes or no.
Yeah, and I may say, listen, I may say, well, hey, it's not, and you may do it anyways. Okay, that's your risk. At least you now know the risk of doing it. But, you asked me earlier, like, when to find a lawyer. I think you need to find a lawyer as soon as possible because, for instance, in the transaction we just did, if we didn't have a relationship, you would have wasted 2 to 5 days trying to find someone to do it for you. that's stressful. You don't want to deal with that. You want to have that person on call where you can pick up the phone and say, hey, Matthew, I got this thing. Help me out. I knew your business. I know you. I was able to do it. It'd be much harder for me to do that on the fly. My clients don't just use me. We use them. We represent guys that do a variety of different things that we hire for work. I know you need X. I've got clients that do X. So, I mean, there's a whole community aspect to it that makes it, really fun.
For 2017, are there any things that, I know that you would think that, hey, listen, going into a new year, pay attention to, best things to kind of be aware of?
I think 2017 is going to be an interesting year of small business growth. And as businesses continue to grow, I think you're going to see a lot of M&A activity. I think you're going to have small businesses merging. I think you're going to have a lot of the startup community is fueled by convertible notes, and in Manhattan the startup community is relatively young. So the convertible notes were executed between, let's say, 3 and 5 years ago, and a lot of those notes are now maturing to the point of they're coming due. So what's going to happen when some of those companies are going to have to either repay those amounts, or the debt is going to convert to equity? And so what does that mean for the cycle of startups? In other words, you're going to have, I think you might see some capital getting a little harder to find at an early stage.
And why is New York more convertible note friendly as opposed to, say, Silicon Valley?
It's not that it's more note friendly. It's that the New York ecosystem is a little younger. Mm-hmm. So in Silicon Valley, it might have started, let's say, 10 years ago. So they've already gone through this cycle once, right? Because, the typical length of a note is 18 to 24 months. So they've gone through that. They also love safe documents, which is a whole other conversation. So they're doing things a little differently over there.
Well, it's scary back over there, yes.
So in New York, it's convertible notes, and convertible notes are going to start to mature. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when some of these companies that have been riding this convertible note wave all of a sudden don't have any more funds.
Wow. So it's really it's either it's due or
it turns to equity. And it turns to equity is not a bad thing. I mean, it turns to equity is, okay, I own X% of this company. Wonderful. What's the company worth? What's the company doing? Can the company raise more money? So I think you're going to start seeing an interesting, the New York marketplace is maturing. You have companies that are maturing. You have the infrastructure is maturing. There's more lawyers, accountants, and other service providers that are better at it now. So I think it'll be interesting to see in Manhattan, in particular, where it goes. We haven't had a blow up unicorn in Manhattan in a while.
Probably good to sort of explain to folks what a unicorn really is.
The technical definition, I think, is $1 billion or more company. It's thrown around to mean a company that has built a successful business. They're usually innovative in some capacity. So they're innovating a antiquated business, and they've been successful. They've gotten mass approval or adoption with that business. So who's going to be that person? Because the city needs that to continue the marketplace. So what's going to happen in New York to continue the wave? And if that doesn't happen, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the wave.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk about unicorns all the time in Silicon Valley, but in New York, I think it's WeWork, maybe? It's probably the only one.
Are they New York based?
I mean, Adam and Jesse are here. I remember when they first started, hella long time ago in the first phase. But anybody else who's a unicorn,
it goes back a while.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be really. I think 2017 will be this year of, okay, what happens to the community? I mean, does it continue to be as charged as we think? I think we'll see. I think small businesses are going to continue to thrive. Startups and small businesses are slightly different. Startups are typically requiring outside capital. So what happens when that outside capital changes? Is it?
Are they going to become more risk averse, or are they going to just be hedging far more?
There's a ton of talent in New York, but the talent is very expensive. So what happens when you can't afford that talent? Does the talent? The talent for a long time was just simply in banking. And over the last 5 years, they've transitioned out of banking into tech, into fintech, into ad tech, and a variety of different industries. So what happens over the next, year to two when some of those companies, some of those people and some of those companies start realizing, well, okay, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, this equity that I thought was worth a lot may not be worth a lot. And then you tie that into the convertible note is due and we can't pay it back. Are they going to be able to raise more money to continue that growth? So I think it's an interest. I think that the New York marketplace is now mature enough to have some problems, which aren't good but aren't bad.
Well, yeah, I think because there's a fundamental difference between the startup ecosystem in New York versus in San Francisco, because in New York you have the convergence of other industries, as opposed to out in the West Coast, it is the wild, wild west still, and it's, which app can get $1 billion, versus here it's like, well, how does this app make me lots of money, and I'm Time Warner, or I'm Hearst, or I'm Condé Nast, or any of those folks. I think that's always been the fundamental difference between the two, and as we go into a new year, it's like, how does that shift work? Because you've got all these other companies that are small businesses who can provide services versus startups. And I think, where do those two begin to intersect? And our services business is going to be the ones that start to get more money and more funding, because at least they can show a revenue model, versus a startup where it's like you're still wishing a prayer. So we shall see. Well, Matthew, it has been fantastic having you. You were a fantabulous guest, and I want to see my bill when this is over. But thanks again to Matthew Moisan from Moisan P.C. I will put all their information on the show notes so that if you guys want to have a chat with them, you can. Please keep in mind that they are lovely folks to deal with, but they ain't cheap, so be for real. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
The Reset Podcast is sponsored by Bose. With my new Bose QC35 headphones, nothing gets between me and my music. The noise canceling is world class, they're completely Bluetooth, so there's no wires, the sound is amazing. My producer and I love these so much that we use them to record every single show. For more information about Bose QC35 headphones and other Bose products, check out Bose.com.
Audiation.